Think of sweet wines, and chances are that the first one that comes to your mind will be Sauternes from Bordeaux, the white jewel in their red crown.
Yes, the golden-hued, rich and luscious wine whose peculiar aroma and candied scents can put a smile on anyone's face. But did you know they were not always sweet and definitely were not noble rot affected? At least it wasn't publicly agreed upon.
That's true. The region we call Bordeaux today was involved in the wine trade with the British for a very long time. But they drank mostly reds, and it was the Dutch who were interested in the white wines, and they got their share from Germany. However, when the consumption of beer went up, white wine production declined, and the Dutch eventually turned to Bordeaux. They already knew how to stop the fermentation by addition of sulfur to produce sweet wines, and that's how they made their wine sweet, or the vin liquoreux, which is wine with unfermented residual sugar.
And talking about botrytis cinerea, or noble rot as we call it, it is a phenomena that persists in humid areas with warm and sunny conditions. The rot sits on the grapes, punches the skin, dehydrates the grape, concentrates the acidity and sugar, and adds its own peculiar taste and mouthfeel, which, although many have tried, can never be artificially replicated.
But the Dutch weren't always using noble rot affected grapes. In fact, Hugh Johnson suggests that the idea of drinking fungus affected wine would not have sat well with the consumers, and that's what kept winemakers from advertising all about it.
However, come the 18th century, the Germans and the Hungarians were practicing winemaking with noble rot affected grapes and enjoying quite good results. Sauternes joined the party. Everyone knew about it, the fungus on the berries, but nobody spoke about it. It was sort of like an open secret.
And then came the American muscle. It drew special attention to the wines of Sauternes in 1787 when Thomas Jefferson tasted the famous Chateau d'Yquem and bought over 350 bottles for George Washington and another 125 for his own self. He even said that there is no other French wine that satiates the American palate quite as well as Sauternes does.
Another story from the house goes that in 1847, the owner was delayed during his trip back from Russia, having left specific instructions that harvest should not begin before his return. Not surprisingly, when he came back, noble rot was well developed when picking finally started, and the wine produced an outstanding vintage, which is highly claimed. Some even call it the vintage of the century.
So now, talking about Sauternes, it's an appellation nestled in the interiors of Bordeaux in the region of Grave. Okay, it's located on the Garonne River, and in the communes are Sauternes, Barsac, Fargues, Beaume, and Prégnac. And combined, they form the Sauternes appellation.
And what about the grapes then?
The inseparable trio of Semillon, Sauvignon Blanc, and Muscadet, and they all have their own contribution to the final wine. Semillon's light skin makes it an easy target for noble rot, leaving it utterly sweet, which then gets balanced by the acidity of a Sauvignon Blanc, which is really crisp and mouth-watering. And Muscadet, it wasn't always there. It came much later, but became a permanent fixture because of the floral inputs that it brings to the works.
Right. And then these grapes are hand harvested, and only the most affected berries are selected, pressed, and traditionally fermented in barrels. Due to high concentration of sugar, the yeast takes up to 2 months for it to break down. The resultant wine must be oak-aged, should have at least 13% of alcohol, and at least 45 grams of sugar, although Sauternes almost always are way sweeter than that.
And in the 1855 classification of Bordeaux, the sweet wines of Sauternes were completely ignored. So the region decided to create its own 3-tier classification. And at the top was the Premier Cru Superior, which was for Chateau d'Yquem solely and exclusively. And then there were the Deuxième and the other crus. Now, why was Chateau d'Yquem the only one? Well, you have to ask yourself who defined the classification, and the answer will come to you.
Yeah. Now, outside of Bordeaux, no one can use the word Sauternes, but Americans love a challenge. They do make Sauternes with a minor adjustment. The wines are called Sauternes without capitalizing the first S and sans the one at the end.
Wow, that will completely fool me, right? Well, but back to France, some of my favorites would be Soudireau, Coutet, Clémence, and Raymond Lafon are some of the nice ones, I think.
Yeah, they all sound good. I reckon finding a good quality value for money Sauternes in the lower tier, so I would stick with Chateau Guirard, Chateau Rouissac, and of course the Deuxième.
And what about India? I think we make some good Sauternes here too, right?
Why am I not surprised? I thought you would ask me that question. All right, for the record, India does not make Sauternes. We do not even make noble rot affected grapes. And if you ask the question why we don't do it, it is to do with the special conditions noble rot requires.
All right, enough chitter chatter. Time to taste. What are you having?
I have this half bottle of a wine called Chateau Piada, which is 2011. And it looks beautiful, very dark, dense color. But yeah, let's smell it.
So what are you expecting on the nose, Gagan, and what are you getting?
Think of everything that is sweet that you can have at the end of your meal. So peaches, apricots, marmalade, honey, raisins, sultanas, and of course that peculiar noble rot aroma as well.
Yeah, I think noble rot sometimes takes away the grape characteristics and replaces it with a very botrytized character that can become common to certain grapes. But I think you can find that across Sauternes and botrytized wines.
And do remember, you're not making wines with grapes, you're making it with raisins, and they are hand harvested. So of course your wines will be very expensive. That's why buying a small bottle makes sense, because A, doesn't put that big a hole in your pocket. B, they're so sweet and so luscious that you won't be able to drink an entire bottle by yourself. And C, the portions that you draw out of a sweet wine are always going to be smaller, be it the sugar count, be it the calorie count, or the price of the wine.
So you would always have it chilled. And how will the bottle last if you don't finish it today? It has lasting power, I assume?
Yeah, I think the sugar will make it something that will stand long even after it is opened. Like the way I've opened it today, I think I'm gonna hold on to it for at least a week. But yeah, it is sweet for sure. But the good amount of acidity, which is not very citrus, but it just cleans the palate, takes away that stickiness from the sweet from the sugar, and yeah, you don't realize that this one is 14% alcohol.
And one last question. Foie gras, I know it's a classical pairing for Sauternes, but if you were in India and pairing it with something Indian today, what would you pair it with?
I would pair it with caramel coated cream puffs or a marmalade tart.
But good treat, Gagan. Enjoy the Sauternes.
All right, I'm going to drink it all. So until next week, cheers.
Cheers.